Why, thank you, and welcome to the Voice Over Today audio podcast. I'm your host, D. Foster III, CEO and President of Wake Up Global Networks International, and I am so thrilled that you decided to join us for this audio podcast. We got a deep dive in our subject today, the tale of two eras. But before we get into it, come on, it's Wednesday. It's 12 noon if you're listening to the live upload. If you're listening to the replay, shout out to all the people that are listening to the replay. We want to say thank you so much. But you know how it goes. Like, share, subscribe. Follow us so you know when we upload brand new content, always bringing you the best. We are the podcast with an eye on the culture discussing relevant. When I say relevant issues, we're not parroting other podcasts. YouTube is a turnoff, but I'll talk about that later. I got a whole show coming up on that. Everybody is a parrot. But anyway, trending topics, and we do the thorough. That's what separates us. We do the thorough investigative journalism. We're not trying to be we're not trying to sound like everybody else. We're not trying to be popular. We're trying to bring the truth up in this booth. Make sure you check out the Voice Over Now podcast that we upload live every Friday, 5 p.m. right here on WPBMediaNetworks.com. I want to say thank you. I want to hear from you. You can also leave your comments in the comment section, or you can email me at thevoiceovertheglobe@gmail.com. Thevoiceovertheglobe@gmail.com. Come on, like this, share this, follow this. You know we bringing you the real information here, the conscious content, and also bringing education and also bringing awareness. You know, I said it, and I said I was going to do a special show on it, and I am. But YouTube quickly is getting very tired to me. You scroll down the YouTube stream, and it looks like everybody is sounding alike, looking alike, or either talking about the same topics. I feel like to have a voice to nations and to stream all over the world, only require one thing, in my opinion. Not a lot of money, not a position. Simple, that you're saying something. Is that too much? That you're saying, from religious, from politics, from sports, from God knows the entertainment industry. Everybody is sounding alike. And it's because when you do reaction videos, which, I'm not saying you don't do reaction videos, but all you're doing is playing somebody else's video, stopping, making your commentary, no investigation, very little, studying, digging deep. You just giving your opinion on what somebody else said. They've done all the work. And it seemed like that's what YouTube is turning into. And personally, before I go on, it's distasteful and it's losing its zest to me very quickly. But anyway, that's the way I wanted to start the podcast. But that's not what this podcast, The Voice Over or The Voice Over Today, is all about. We are original, and we do the work, and we put the pieces together with the best of our abilities. And yes, we say things that you think. That's what makes the Voice Over Today audio podcast, the Voice Over Today audio podcast. Today's subject is the tale of two eras, time periods. And let me make the setting clear. The main characters in this discussion are the wonderful, brilliant, attractive, smart, educated Monica McNutt. She's in one corner. In the other corner is the traditional, argumentative, must be right, Stephen A. Smith. To me, one represents the past, the other the future. One represents a focus on sexism and racism, and the other represents gender inclusion and the fact of the international embraces the international race spectrum of our times. Today's discussion focuses on the truth. Now, if you don't ever believe anything that I say with this title, the title is that the focus is the game has changed. And so has the players. This podcast or illustration of the characters that I have standing in opposite corners, not for a point of division, but for a point of emphasis, because I already hear that they've made up, which is fine, but I want to deal with what I saw and heard and perceived last week. Oh, yes. And everybody is talking about it and everybody's taking sides, but this has nothing to do with Stephen A. and this has nothing to do with Monica as people. They both were right, in my opinion, on some points. But that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the fact that the game has changed. And a lot of people don't know the game have changed. A lot of the old heads, what's old heads? People who refuse to embrace the past, the future, people who holding on to the past. It's not nothing to do with age, it's mentality. They cannot see themselves going into a bright future because they want to maintain their status of prominence. Stephen A. In today's discussion, I want to focus on the truth that the game has changed. What game? Every game. The rap game, the entertainment game, the sports game, the church game, the political game. And so has the players. Now, for those of you who have no clue of what or who I am talking about, let me briefly explain. I'm sure you've heard of, and you may not have if you don't listen to sports, if you're not into sports, which is cool, or if you've not looked at ESPN. Stephen A. Smith, he's very vocal, probably one of the most vocal sports analysts that I know. An American sports television personality, radio, you see him all over ESPN on everybody's show when it talks about sports. He's a journalism. And in my personal opinion, this is D. Foster, one of the greatest argue-list, like journalist, argue-list of all times. He makes his appearance. You may see him on NBA Analysts, giving his opinion, ESPN, Sports Center. And then he has the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. He's a commentator. I mean, he goes all up and down. And then, bless our heart, he has the ESPN First Take. That's going to be my focus for this podcast. The First Take, where he appears with Precious Molly. Precious Molly. What would he do without Molly? Smith is, hint, 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 Molly. Some Molly Quorum, last name Querim. So you won't think I'm talking about Molly, the drug. No, it's Molly, Querim, his kind of co-host. He's a featured columnist, et cetera, et cetera. So you got the concept of he's very vocal, very strong, no sports. I'll leave it right there. But then in the other corner, there's Monica McNutt, an American basketball analyst for ESPN, very sharp woman, and the MSG network. Let me see. Monica played college basketball for the Georgetown Warriors. I bet you my big brother, Coach Butch McAdams, probably knows her. McNutt began working at ESPN in 2019 as an ACC network studio and game analyst. See, this McNutt is brilliant, and this is what I'm talking about. She represents everything of moving forward, progression, futuristic, cutting edge, right? Wait a minute. You didn't say that about Stephen A. Absolutely. I didn't. Where her role slowly grew to include Sports Center. Now, this is a woman. WNBA coverage and more. Prior to joining ESPN, McNutt worked at Channel 7. That's where I used to see her. I forgot the guy she used to work with, tall guy, that's still there. But he started off in sports. He does the morning news now for 7, WJLA in DC, the American Sports Network. McNutt is a studio analyst for the New York Knicks now. Before I get into what I want to talk about, this could be a little bit why Smith is a little booted up because she's become one of the prize voices for the New York Knicks. I'm just saying, allegedly, in my opinion. She hosts the MSG PM on the MSG network. She appeared, I've seen her on Fox Sports News. I've heard her on Fox Sports News, CBS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And podcast guests all the time for sports podcasts. And in my opinion, and you do your homework if you haven't heard of her, but I think if those of you have heard of her, you would agree, a very brilliant, very intelligent, very smart, forward-thinking woman. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Monica knows that it is clear, and I praise God for it, that she is an extremely liberated black woman who feels comfortable in her skin and is always down for the smoke. You know, I appreciate people kind of like the judge in the Young Thug case, and I may do something on that on Friday. This is how you do it. Stephen, I think his name is Mr. Steele. I forgot his first name, Stephen. He had some information that he thought was unethical, and he mentioned it to the judge, and the judge wanted to know how he got the information. And he was like, I'm not giving you how I got the information until you acknowledge, that this was unethical. And the judge went back and forth, and he says, I will hold you in contempt. Mr. Steele was like, okay, but I'm still not going to give up the information because right is right. I said that about Monica. She loves the smoke, which means she doesn't back down. And that's not easy being a black woman in the quickly fast changing arena of sports. Because what I want to get into is that who used to dominate the sports world doesn't dominate it anymore. And this comes out to me clearly in this conversation with McNutt and Stephen A. But anyway, she's very liberated, comfortable in her own skin, down for the smoke. I am 100% with those people. They don't back down to the pressure of being liked or disliked. They said what they said. That's what you get with defaults to 3. I said what I said. That's what makes this podcast and my Friday podcast so unique. We're not trying to walk a gray line. I mean, you don't give anyway. So, I mean, what? I mean, most people that walk a gray line is for their sponsors. But when you're independent, you own your own voice, right? Anyway, so let's rewind to last week. And let me make it clear that during Monica's visit on First Take, I saw the tale of 2 eras, 2 time periods. One fighting to hold on to prominence, Stephen Smith, and the other ripping the past to shreds, Monica McNutt. Now, having said all of that, in my opinion, let's be clear. My analysis of the bigger picture is not to stir up mess. I ain't trying to stir up mess between the two. Keep it going. Like I said, I already heard that at least she went over to make it right. I don't know if he will ever recover. I believe Stephen Smith has that big male type of ego, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, let's be clear my motive in doing this show. It's not to stir up any mess. It's not to stir up any mess or to be an instigator, but I want to use their dialogue as a real live illustration to prove the point that I've been saying for several years. The game has changed, and so have the players. New game, which, in my opinion, Monica is playing in, and new game, new voice, new representation. Now, there's a backstory to what I'm about to tell you, and it all has to do with the discussion of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, right? You can go back and look at all of that. There's a whole lot of competition because One of the games that are changing is basketball. And I'll get to that in a minute. It's no longer ruling the court male black players like it used to be. Stephen A., get over it. Get over it, sir. But I'm going to say something. And I don't want you to be upset with me, because if it's not you, then you won't holler when this accurate analysis comes in your direction. A lot of times, those who were brought up in the civil rights era, it's very difficult for them to change. That era, that, say, 50s era, and I don't know how old, I think Smith is 56 or something like that, but if not in that era, in that 60s era, say 50 and 60, it's hard for them to change. Because that civil rights, that black annotation, that African American culture, breeding is ingrained. And I think, I'm just my opinion, and I can do my opinion. I think that's ingrained in Stephen A. I think that mentality. Now, what happened? Last week on Smith's show, First Take, Monica was bold enough, in my opinion, to do what few people I've seen, and if they do, they back down, do with Stephen A. Because, Stephen A. can be very intimidating, very loud, very boisterous. That's why I say I think he's the greatest argulist that exists on podcast or TV. Because if you want an argument, he's kind of like one of the people, in my opinion, who they'll talk you down, talk over you like he was doing Monica, till not that he is right, but he will look right, because you just don't want to keep putting out the energy to try to butt in and get your point across, right? And I felt like that's what happened. So what happened? Monica was questioning Stephen Smith about how First Take and Stephen A. lacked coverage of the WNBA before the arrival of Caitlin Clark to this season, right? So she was like, and you can go back and look at it, but I'm making a point. I think you could have did better 3 years ago. You've always had a major sports platform, and AKA, I'm filling in the blanks. And so you just start talking about women's NBA since Caitlin came in. But there were always those players, and that's some of the backdrop of how they got in this conversation, because that's a little bit what's going on. Is it a little bit jealousy? I don't know, but I know sports is competition. But she was like, there are people who laid the groundwork that you ain't never really gaslight like this. That basically, and I'm summarizing, right? So what happened was Stephen claimed that he had been a leader in covering the WNBA way before he started gaslighting Caitlin. Well, only thing I remember Stephen gaslighting is he would, the major basketball teams at that time. Like, I know he always knocked the Cowboys, but I know that he was very into gaslighting and promoting male-dominant black teams for the most part, right? Anyway, and Uncle Shannon was also on the show. I ain't got much to say, but Shannon got sense, because he went back and had her on his show that night to make it right. See, he understands where the power lies. Now, let me interject that. If Shannon didn't understand that Monica, unlike Stephen, he didn't understand, but Shannon didn't understand Monica has power and a voice in the sports world, you better believe he would have never invited her on his night show so she could speak without being spoken over and clarify some things. That's because Shannon has more to lose than Stephen A. I think Stephen A. has seen his better days because of what I'm talking about now. You don't want to move forward. You don't want to realize the game that you came in under does not exist anymore, in my opinion. So what had happened was when she challenged, when Monica McNutt on Stephen's First Take, his own show, when she challenged and did the unthinkable to Smith and challenged him, talking about how he's not been covering and how he's only really been focusing in on the last year or so. She pushed back on his claim. Wait a minute, how dare she? Do you know who you're pushing back on? Do you know you're pushing back on Stephen A., the voice that's always right and the voice of authority? Didn't she know that Smith hails from that era, that the man is always right? She couldn't tell that. I mean, this is not her first time on the show. Matter of fact, they're good friends. You didn't know that Stephen hails from that era, that he's always right, never to be challenged, and that women ought to be seen and not heard? That's my opinion. Seriously, y'all, that's the kind of vibe that it was giving me when I was watching how he pushed back. His whole demeanor changed. Like, first she was a guest, co-host, Sharon, but when she pushed back on the fact that he had been the main supporter or one of the major voices for women's basketball, and she said, nah, I don't think so. In other words, man, the real Stephen came out. The gig is up. The gig is, share this, share this, share this. You may not see it that way. Leave your comments. Now here's what she said in response. I think my miscalculation was assuming that the relationship, and I quote, had enough depth to challenge, because my friends and the people that I call in my circle, we can challenge one another, end quote. Monica, I agree 1,000-fold with you, girl. That is the way, my sister, it should be done. It should be that if they're in your circle and Stephen A. was in your circle, that you should have healthy dialogue and conversation and allowed to disagree. But when you're dealing with old heads, now I'm not talking about age, but mentality. What do I define as an old head? I'm not talking about age. I just said those who were born around that 50s, 60s, it's hard for them to change. I didn't say they can't change. It's just harder because of what was going on in their communities at that time. But a lot of them have changed and become forward thinkers and innovators. Shout out to them. But old head, Monica was right. I thought we could have a reasonable conversation, disagree without being disagreeable. But you got to know Stephen A. You got to know that wouldn't have went down like that. Because Stephen A. refuses to accept and embrace the fact that the world has changed. And to force people like that into this new world, unless they go voluntarily, that's all you're going to ever get. Loud talking, a disposition of they will not be disrespected, though there was no disrespect when I watched that interview. I think Monica was watching her words very carefully because she began to realize who and what she was dealing with. And when you're dealing with an old head, that's all you can get. Loud, over-talking, defensive, entitled conversation. Nobody's down for that today. Now, my issue with Stephen A. is not his explanation of why the team should protect Caitlyn as the golden goose. Okay? I mean, like I said at the beginning, both of them had some very vital points. And Stephen A. was like, okay, she got bold, but the reason that people are harping on Caitlin Clark is because she has brought, kind of like Tiger Woods did golf, to a new level. She's brought women's basketball to a new level. Okay, fine, if we accept that. And as the golden goose, she should be protected. But it wasn't his opinion. But his and Shannon. Because Shannon started to side with him. But I think Shannon's thought, wait a minute, this cannot end well. And if you notice, what I noticed is that what Smith, and this is what old heads do, kept emphasizing was sexism, male, and black racism. And again, that comes out of that era of the civil rights movement and people who are embittered and can't move forward. Listen, there's a whole different world than it was when Martin Luther King was alive. This is the melting pot of the world. But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. Like this, share this, follow this. It was his response to her pushback. My issue is not anything Smith, well, I do have some issues with what he said. But what overrode that and overrides that is his response. That old mentality of alluding to the fact. All right, this is what I got. All right, who you talking to? Who you challenge? If I said I've been the main voice of the women's NBA, then that's who I've been. And who are you, youngin'? You know when they call you youngin', right? Youngin', to say anything different. And then, unlike Shannon, then Molly jumps in, precious Molly. That's why I call Molly. Okay, you guys. I'm like, shut up, Molly. This is getting good. Monica is roasting the old head. Okay, guys, we heard your point. This has gone on for 40 minutes. I'm like, Molly, where'd it get you from? Go back to where you came from. How did Molly end up? Did he pick her, or did the corporation? I got to look into that, because they don't seem like they go together. Anyways, that's why I do my podcast myself. I know the kind of energy I want on this show, and when I want experts, I bring them on. But I don't want nobody diluting my energy and my focus by like, okay, D. Foster, we've gone on all. No. I got some more things to say. It's my podcast. Molly, click off. But anyway, that's just me. It was like he was giving vibes that he shouldn't be challenged. And then, again, unlike Shannon, who invites her later that day on his podcast to clear the air, because Shannon understands what time it is and how people were siding with Monica McNutt against Stephen A. and how people were saying it looks like at sometimes they were both jumping on her, ganging up on her. Oh, that's not a good look. I told y'all last week when I was talking about camera, that's never a good look, and it's never gonna ride. And I'm not saying Stephen A. and Shannon shouldn't have their own opinion, but it's your response and approach to what's being said and to who's saying it that matters. Share this. And then he, unlike Shannon, because if Stephen A. was forward thinking, if Stephen A. wasn't an old head, he would have did like Shannon. He would have said, you know what? I want to invite you back on tomorrow. We've been friends. We know each other. I want to, just you and I, come on and have a civil conversation so we can clear all of this up and show that there's nothing between us. He didn't do that. You know what he did? The argumentative. He jumped on his podcast, I believe it was the next day, and tore her basically to shreds. And you could tell he was still angry. And this is the part that I cannot deal with. This is the part that I resent. That's why I always say, listen, even if it takes you a long time, build your own platform, own your own voice. Don't let people put you up, because you know what he said? And I think it was an insult, but he was insulted. He was trying to insult her and belittle her, and came on and said, in essence, without me. Ooh, I feel that in my sha-na-na-na. Oh God, without me, you would not be anything. I gave you a voice and I gave you a platform. And how dare you challenge me? Old head. See, she wasn't smart. She should have been Dee Foster, got on her platform the next day and said, you can take the platform you gave me. Well, she probably couldn't say it like this. The influence you lent me. And the thing about it is people can give you whatever you want, but it's your brilliance and your intelligence that help you maintain it. And you can put it where the sun don't shine. Don't ever give me any. And that's what I be saying on this platform, why it is important to take the long route and build your own platform so nobody can ever shove in your face what they did for you. Now, as I close, the bottom line of today's show is that this whole sports scene has changed. Yet, Stephen A. and Shannon Sharpe have come since they have come on the scene. When they came on the scene, basketball, football was male-dominated, the league, black and white. That's the era they came from. Now, it's WNBA that's dominating the league. It's not just black and white. It's all nationalities that have migrated into this country are playing the game of sports, and especially women's basketball. Stephen A., get over it. Unless you change, and Unc, you too, because you'll get up on that same wagon. And the thing about it is, and I'm just being very transparent on my podcast, I don't know why these old heads always feel a sense of entitlement. Like you got to kiss their behind for what they did 50 years ago and ain't been relevant since. Stephen A., get a grip. There's a new analyst in town. They're very brilliant, very smart, very capable. I'm not putting her against him, but I'm just making a claim. Monica McNutt, you ain't seen the last of her. Stephen A. got a few more. I think now, I'll be surprised, and I'll come on and correct it. I don't know if ESPN will renew him after his contract. That may be a seat for Monica. Like this, share this, follow it. If you like this kind of content, I want you to join us Friday. I got more of this stuff. See, ain't no reaction. We do the homework, and we are not afraid to give our opinion on the facts. This is Dee Foster 3. Until Friday, I want to say Happy Father's Day. In case you don't get the Friday show, Happy Father's Day to all of the father's figures. And I'm going to encourage you as we celebrate our queens in May every year or every day, but especially nationally in May, do something good for the men who are holding up and taking their responsibility. I mean, that's what we should do. We shouldn't get a special award, but just simple a thank you. On behalf of Wake Up Global Networks International, we want to wish all of the fathers and father figures a happy Father's Day. Peace.